Um, Thank you so much for joining us here today. I am, for the moment, Gabriella Coleman, professor of anthropology, who is supposed to be here co-hosting this event, a friend and sometimes collaborator or interlocutor of Antonio, and who's come down with something and is so sorry that she's not here. So I am here as Biella to welcome you all at this moment. I'm so delighted to have Antonio and you all here to talk about his important book, which has just come out in English translation. So I'm going to give an introduction. Antonio will present some material from the book and some new work. Yeah. And then we'll have a little bit of a talk show chat, and you should all then feel free to jump in and ask questions as you wish. Antonio Casilli is a full professor of sociology at the Institut Polytechnique de Paris, an associate researcher in the School for Advanced Studies in the Social Sciences, or École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales, and an associate researcher at the Mindru Center for Technology and Democracy at the University of Cambridge, where he was elected as an overseas fellow at Churchill College. Casilli co-founded both the I should have asked you how to pronounce this, the DeepLab, a digital platform labor research program, and the International Network on Digital Labor, which bring together an international consortium of expertise on social networks, digital platforms, and digital labor. His research and publications span a diverse range of interconnected topics, including digital labor and platform capitalism, the hidden work, human work behind artificial intelligence, social networks and digital relationships, online privacy and surveillance, e-health and online speech, and communicational violence in cognitive capitalism. His most recent book, Waiting for Robots, The Hired Hands of Automation, reflects his interdisciplinary, theoretically rich, and empirical approach that examines how digital platforms are transforming labor and regulations across different cultural contexts, blending insights from sociology, economics, and technology studies to reveal the often invisible human dimensions of our increasingly automated world. Favorably reviewed in Nature, they unsurprisingly chose it as one of their top science picks. We are delighted that he is here to share some insights from this book. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Antonio Casilli.
Thank you, Moira. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, after that introduction, I should probably also add that not all the reviews were that favorable. Yes, Science and Nature were saying good things, but if you go on Twitter, or X as it's now called, you will find people who say that basically this book is the worst contribution, the worst Italian contribution to the US culture since Luigi Mangione, and I'm quoting. Do whatever you want with it, but anyway. So the point is that this book has a complicated legacy because it's a long story. I've been working on it for 10 years now, and it has been published in different versions and permutations and in different languages. And now we are happy to have the English version, which is an augmented, updated, and also on steroids version of the previous books, because we had to take into account a number of things that happened between 2019, the first time the book was published in French, and today. And one of those things is, of course, the so-called AI, generative AI boom. One should probably underplay that. There's a lot of problems. But anyways, just to give you an idea of how we, and by we I mean me and my research team at DeepLab in Paris, work. Basically, we focus on not the model part of AI. We focus on the data part. So instead of taking a face value, what kind of rhetoric that usually goes with the launch of new AI products, the fact that they are, GPT-4 was rumored to have like 1 trillion parameters, whatever that means. We tend to look at the data that are used to train these models. Of course, I understand that here everybody is aware of the fact that whenever we say artificial intelligence today, we basically mean machine learning. And by machine learning, we mean that we have statistical models that are trained based on huge masses of examples. And these examples can be, of course, images, can be bits of text or videos or speech, and so on and so on. So basically, we look at the data part, not only the training part. You will see in a minute that it's larger than that, it's bigger than that. It's not only the pre-training part. And we especially rely on the fact that, historically speaking, whenever we had some major breakthrough in the discipline of AI and also in the AI market, these breakthroughs were preceded by a few years, usually, by the production of huge databases. For instance, if we go back to 1997, when IBM Deep Blue was defeated Garry Kasparov at chess, which was a landmark moment in the history of AI, it was preceded in 1991 by the publication of 25 million games and openings in chess. And this is how the IBM Deep Blue model was actually trained. Not only learning the rules of chess, but also seeing 25 million possible permutations of games. And if we skip to 2020, because we do not have time, 2020 is the date when GPT-3, so probably the grandfather of all three, the present version of the OpenAI model, when GPT-3 was launched, it was preceded by, almost 8 years, by the launch of another big initiative in terms of production of data called Common Crawl. Common Crawl is still available online, you can access, and they are not shy about the fact that they are basically the standard benchmark reference if you want to scrape the web to collect data that are usually textual data, because they are used to train LLMs, so large language models. Now, the problem is that if we just rely on these facts, meaning the states and the fact that we have millions or terabytes of data, we only see part of the picture, especially if we ask the question, where are these data located? Some colleagues of ours, like Bernard Koch and Alexander and colleagues, back in 2021, started mapping the places where databases that are now largely used to train AI are located. So we see, we also see this place here. They are in places like Stanford, Princeton, Max Planck, Berkeley, Harvard. It's not among the top, but anyways. Of course, you also see the usual suspects like Meta, Microsoft, and Google and Amazon. These are companies and locations where data centers and servers are located, and these data centers basically host this data. If we just rely on this map, there is a surprising point that we have to raise here, that more or less this coincides with the standard geography of AI and also the standard history of AI. If we tell the history of AI like there were a bunch of white guys in 1957 in somewhere on the east coast of the US, and then there are other guys in Palo Alto, and then you have other persons, I don't know, in Cambridge or in Berlin, and then in Seoul, or Seoul, if you want to pronounce it correctly. This looks like a very northern hemisphere story. This is only part of the story. And to be frank, with my research team, we tend to look at the other part of this geography, basically the data production that happens in the majority world. Our emblem, it's very French to have an emblem for a research team, is this data iceberg. Basically, this symbolizes the fact that we look not at the emerging part of the AI phenomenon in general, digital technologies such as AI, but we also look at what happens under the water. And under the water, well, we can see that the places where we go looking for data workers and those who train AI, and many of these stories are told in this book, are not always the places that you would encounter in the standard geography of AI. We tend to be, let's say, a little zigzaggy. Sometimes I like to say that we travel the world and solve mysteries, which sounds a little like Scooby-Doo. But yes, many of the people we interview and many of the service we do are in places like Venezuela or Kenya or Madagascar. And this, importantly, gives us an entirely different view of what AI is. And just to provide you with the core of my argument, we can still use ChatGPT as a good example of the fact that there is a front office which is made of engineers, well paid, and very well advertised AI models, but behind that we have millions of women and men that annotate the data, verify the result, and do the machine learning and the reinforcement learning that are necessary to have these AI work. You see some of their faces because we invited them to come to the European Parliament last year, and we had data annotators and data labelers and data moderators that came from places like Venezuela, Kenya, Syria, Iran, and so not exactly the places where you would expect to find, to see that AI happens, but these are the places where AI happens too. These persons are usually hired, and I insist on the fact that it's a matter of the hired hands of automation. They are not always employed, they are rarely employed. They are very often paid piecemeal, paid by task, and very poorly paid at that. And OpenAI eventually had to be a little transparent about the fact that the places where their ChatGPT product is trained are places like Kenya, like South Africa. Yeah, of course, there's also UK, Turkey, India, and you see this logos. You see our logos of very famous platforms, online platforms that are used to recruit these data labelers. They do not work directly for OpenAI. They work for subcontractors. You will see in a minute. And of course, Canada is involved. Lionbridge is a Canadian company now, owned by TELUS, and Scale, which is very close to home, to be frank. They also recruit people in the Philippines. So you see that even AI had, in 2022, 2023, had to admit that a lot of the data production that goes into the AI pre-training and then verification and then quality control happens in places that are not always the places where we would expect AI to be situated, located. How do they work? What do they do, these data workers? Again, I assume that you are entirely familiar with this, but just to make sure that everybody, including those online, are on the same page, let me give you a few examples of the tasks that these persons are hired and recruited to do. These tasks are very small. They are sometimes called microtasks. They can last a few seconds or a few minutes. Sometimes they are longer. And usually people are paid very poorly. By very poorly, you will see there are people that are paid like 1 or 2 or 3 cents for these tasks. What are these tasks? Sometimes they have to read a text or listen to a conversation or a snippet of conversation and quickly make a judgment call. Is it about, I don't know, is this conversation about, I don't know, politics or the weather? And just tag the conversation. Or sometimes they have to tag images. Like, I don't know, you have this mountain view and you have to tag, this is clouds, these are mountains, this is a lake. The same thing we do whenever we are on, I don't know, Instagram, and we tag an image, right? We put hashtags on an image. Who are these people? And how do the companies that hire these people describe them or represent them? This is Uber, that back in 2018 used to represent their data annotators this way. They are young, they are clearly in a kind of casual situation. Probably, I don't know, there is some kind of romance going on. Probably it's just me, I'm projecting, I'm sorry. But anyways, they seem to be very young, very blonde. Their reality is slightly different, and now I will start showing images that come both from other people's fieldwork and from our own fieldwork. The reality of this workforce is more like this. I reassure it's not the kids, it's the father, more probably, that is who is a data worker in the city of Hyderabad in India, and this person was recruited to annotate Waymo self-driving cars, so Google self-driving cars. These are images that come from our fieldwork, for instance, in Africa. These are data workers in the city of Antananarivo in Madagascar at the end of their work day, and they are going home. In some cases, they don't need to go home from work because home is where they work. Sometimes they work from their bedroom. This is the bedroom of two twin brothers, like 18, 19, and they have created a small operations with the boys and girls from the neighborhood. And they take turns on this same computer day and night to perform tasks and earn a few bucks and to share, to pool the money, right? I will tell you in a minute how little the compensation is. This is a cyber cafe. This is another place where I have encountered people doing data work. Cyber cafes, there are people that, I don't know, just replying to their emails and people doing data work for companies. And these, in some cases, it looks like more as a standard office, a standard production floor. You have hundreds of people, each one has a computer, and usually this situation is a situation we encounter whenever data workers are working on, I don't know, projects that are more sensitive, like for instance, in this case was a military application. So the problem, or the not so good news when we talk about what AI is doing to the workforce is that these workers are not a temporary phenomenon. First of all, they are a sizable chunk of the global workforce. According to some estimates by the World Bank, we're talking about hundreds of millions of people. I tend to be cautious, but anyway, the number is considerable. And importantly, they are not going anywhere soon. Away anytime soon, because it's not only about training AI. It's not only about preparing once and then it's done. As any good athlete will tell you, the training never stops. Once you have trained, you have to retrain. So the scheme, or probably the model we use with my research team is, this is called the PVI model, which stands for preparation, verification, and imitation. I will give you 3 examples and then we switch to a more, let's say, human conversation with more. What is AI preparation? AI preparation is basically what sometimes is just called training or pre-training of AI. So again, ChatGPT, the P in GPT stands for pre-train. It has been trained for a number of years on billions or trillions of examples of images and snippets of conversation. And this is the initial phase. Then there is a validation phase, and then there is an impersonation phase. Let me give you 3 examples quickly taken from our fieldwork. The preparation phase. I'm pretty sure you will remember this example. This is an example that comes from our research, our survey in Brazil in 2023. One of the persons we interviewed was a woman who was paid to do a specific micro task to train AI. She was hired to take pictures of her dog's excrements. To do what? To train an AI of a robot vacuum cleaner. The robot vacuum cleaner, as you can imagine, has to avoid all the obstacles that the machine may encounter in an apartment. One of these obstacles may be the dog's excrement. So this woman was paid very poorly again to take pictures of dog's poop. As disgusting as it sounds, it is necessary, and this just puts in place a very standard and simple supply chain. We have a company that produces these robots, vacuum cleaners in the US, and then we have a pool of workers that are located in Brazil, and it's pretty straightforward. Let's look at something more complicated. This is somebody that we interviewed in 2019. She does something different. It is not about preparation, it is not about training, but it's about verifying that an AI that is already on the market works properly. This is quality control, okay? This is not pre-training, it's post-training, okay? This person was paid to receive hundreds of snippets of conversations, like audio bites, 3 to 5 seconds, and she received like 100 of those per hour, and she was supposed to quickly listen to these snippets of conversation, and then check that a vocal assistant, so like, I don't know, a Siri, or in this case it was Cortana, Microsoft's Cortana, interpreted correctly what the person, the user of the vocal assistant was saying. It's a very standard and very important activity that also raises some questions in terms of privacy, because you do have human beings listening to what you are telling to your vocal assistant or to your smartphone in your pocket. What is the supply chain? It's slightly more complicated. We have Microsoft that subcontracts to a Chinese platform the task of recruiting people to perform this data work. The Chinese platform subcontracts to a Japanese platform the recruiting of these persons. The Japanese platform subcontracts to a Spanish platform the recruiting of people in Europe, and the subcontractor in Spain recruits people in France, and the people in France produce the data and send them back to the US. A little more complicated. Let me finish with this example that is about AI impersonation. AI impersonation is a very controversial topic because, in a sense, I am saying that a good part of today's AI is fake. By this I mean that there are living human beings live that are operating as AI, that impersonate AI. Sometimes it is very necessary to test AI. Sometimes it's just a fraud. Or some colleagues might describe it as photomation or heteromation. These are fancy terms to describe something which is quite shady, but again, very pervasive, very common. This example comes from, well, between Europe and Africa. You will see in a minute. There is a German company that produces smart cameras, smart surveillance cameras that are deployed in European supermarkets. These surveillance cameras are supposed to recognize human behaviors within the supermarkets and prevent shoplifting. Whenever somebody is detected as a shoplifter, this smart camera sends an automated text message to the security operators or agents of the supermarkets, right? It's all fine and dandy. It is, of course, very complicated to come up with an algorithm like this. So let me show you the algorithm. The algorithm is actually 120 persons in a house. It's actually a very standard house in Antananarivo, Madagascar again. And they are working day and night in each room of this house has been converted in basically a click farm or a data farm. So each room you enter, you find 30 persons with the computers, and they are annotating data. There is only one toilet, and there is no garbage disposal. And every day, I spent 1 week with them. Every day, each one of us had to go out in the garden and burn the garbage. This just to give you an idea of what are the working conditions of these persons. Some of them are working in some rooms, some of them are working from the garage. And to be clear, this is not an AI training situation. This is AI impersonation, and they are very aware of the fact that they are just doing live surveillance. They are the algorithm. And over 5 years that we've been following this company, they never actually developed an AI. And importantly, when it comes to their compensation, the compensation of these workers, this company allegedly pays them up to the equivalent of $110 per month. $110 per month in the local currency is supposed to be a good salary for Antananarivo. I can tell you that it is not a good salary at all. You cannot survive with a family, especially in an expensive, relatively expensive city like the capital of Madagascar. Some of these persons are not even paid in money. They are paid in kind. And by in kind, I mean, this is an image that we took in another, a picture that we took in another company, similar to the previous one, where at the entrance of the company, you had this kind of barometer of each performance, each number of tasks would correspond to a certain type of compensation. The basic one, you receive 1 kilogram of sugar, and then you receive 1 kilogram of beans, and then you receive 5 kilograms of rice, 25 kilograms of rice, and so on and so on. So AI impersonation in this case, it's a vicious circle. We basically have a company in Germany. The company in Germany sends a live video feed to Madagascar. The people in Madagascar just check the video feed and send back the text messages or not. And this has been going on for 5 years. So this is not even, again, a supply chain properly. It's just a back and forth situation. Just to finish, this is the takeaway message. And this is also the takeaway message of this book, and probably the contribution that could start our conversation. Whenever we are talking about AI, we are not talking only about a technology, we are also talking about a huge global labor arbitrage operation, probably the biggest in our history, that of course is reminiscent because there are some geographical overlapping of pre-existing situations of labor arbitrage, like for instance, coal centers or mining operations or even food industry or textile industries. Just to give you an idea of how this develops over the years and over the continents, these are basically what we know so far based on the data that we have at DeepLab in France, that our colleagues at Oxford Internet Institute have in the UK, and our colleagues at the ILO in Geneva, it's of course the International Labour Organization, have been collecting over the last 10 years and more. Basically, what we know so far is that if we look at the locations of the companies that market AI solutions, that sell AI solutions, they are of course based in the Northern Hemisphere, with a couple of remarkable exceptions, because of course China is now a big actor, India too, and Russia since 2022, for reasons that if you want, we can discuss then in the Q&A. This is where the companies that make money out of AI are located. But where are the workers located? Well, there are basically four flows of data work. The first one is the first to be attested back in 2013. It goes from Southeast Asia through India, through the UK, through here, the US. And these has been attested for a number of years. There is a second one that is internal to China. This is something that has come to the forefront very recently since the DeepSeek viral moment. And it is pretty clear now that China has been investing very heavily on data annotation basis, national operations that are deployed in tier 3 cities, meaning cities that are very populous and relatively rich, but a little less rich than Hangzhou or Shenzhen or other cities where companies that sell AI are located. So this is an internal market for China. For the South America, there's a double flux. There is a fork in the road. There is a lot of workers, especially in places like Colombia and Venezuela, that work for US-based companies, and just some kind of Monroe Doctrine but applied to data. But there are a number of workers, especially in Venezuela, that work increasingly for companies that are located either in Spanish-speaking countries in Europe, but also on for Russia's platforms that are becoming big players. And then finally, we have the African flows that we have been exploring for a number of years already. So we have French-speaking countries like Madagascar, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal that produce data for places like, I don't know, France again. You do have places like Kenya that produce data for OpenAI or Meta. And then you have places like Egypt that sell data work to China. I have been interviewing people who do face recognition training for Tencent, and they are located in the outskirts of Cairo in Egypt. So this is the final part. I just wanted to leave you with the another piece or example of my work. I'm not satisfied with writing books. I also write documentaries, and with some friends of mine, we've been broadcasting television documentaries about these topics. The first one was published in 2020. It's called Invisibles. You can access it more or less legally on YouTube. The second one was just issued recently, and it's not available in the US. So I just wanted to share with you. I hope that, I can do stop share here and then share again. I just wanted to share with you just a couple of minutes of, as a preview of what will be most likely available in the US in a few months' time. The title of the documentary is In the Belly of AI, and so biblical reference. And this sequence here is a union of workers in Kenya that are unionizing and organizing against a company that we won't name. It's OpenAI. Pardon my French subtitles. That's the final sequence, and then we open the floor.
So, guys, thank you for coming. The purpose of the meeting today was just to share your experiences. I'm sure you've worked for AI companies here in Kenya. There's no limit. Feel free to talk. Feel free to air out your experiences as elaborate as possible.
I think, first of all, let me go back to the question you had raised about whether the problem is the AI and the big tech firms or the intermediaries. I would tell you it's both. First of all, the AI and the big tech companies, they know what is happening. It's not like they don't know. It's not like they are paying the intermediaries, let's say $100 per hour for every job or per task, and then they know that you're being paid $2. They know those things. So it's only that they're also taking advantage. Both the intermediary and the AI or the big tech companies are in business, and they want to maximize their profits. The only problem is they do that at the detriment of the people who are doing the actual job. These companies hate unions because they know they will reduce their profit at some point. They will demand good, like for us, we wanted psychologists and psychiatrists on site because of the kind of job we were doing. It was traumatizing. But they don't want that because that's an extra expense. So if we all came together, both the employees who are working under other companies or intermediaries and the people who are working individually, we can really be strong. If we start ourselves, in Kenya it is possible. We can start with the people we know, and then we'll keep looking for people to join. Then after that, once we establish our union, it's registered, we can now begin that collective bargaining negotiations with these companies. Then that is how we will be strong.
Okay, thank you very much. Just wanted to make sure that you also heard the voices of the actual people, not only of me.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I have a number of things that I'm keen to ask, but I imagine others do as well. So I thought maybe I'd start with just one or, is that too loud? That's all right. With just one or two questions, and then see if others have some as well. So two questions that were on my mind the whole time you ended up talking about right at the end. And so I've partly had them answered, but I wanted to ask maybe if you would expand on them a bit. And one had to do with the question of what stays, what aspects of the data labeling supply chain or the AI supply chain replicate previously existing supply chains from globalization, previous structures of empire that extend back a long time, much longer than just the past few decades, and which things, if anything, are new, and also how big a role language difference plays in that or not was something I was curious about. So maybe I'll start with just that.
Let me start with the language part because, okay, let's be clear. This book, again, was published for the first time in 2019. Since then, we have had a number of interesting books by very good friends of us, of mine especially, like, I don't know, Mary Gray and Sid Suri, Ghost Work, or Mark Graham and others from the Oxford Internet Institute, Feeding the Machine was published very recently. So there are a number of books that deal with this same matter. The difference is that for this book, Waiting for Robots, I had access to companies and platforms of workers that are not always English from English-speaking countries. And this gives an entirely different pattern in terms of this labor arbitrage, because we work a lot with French-speaking countries, but also workers that speak regional languages like Hausa ignore it, like Hausa in Africa, or Spanish or Portuguese. It gives an entirely different overview because, importantly, these points towards some replication of specific patterns that some colleagues of ours do not hesitate to describe as colonialist. I'm thinking about the work of Ulises Mejias and Nick Coldry, who published this book, The Costs of Connection, and they make a very powerful argument that colonialism is not only a metaphor, it's actually the same 500-year-long process that is still going on. And to come to your first question, this is clearly visible if we look at the places which are like the landing points of this kind of supply chains. We discover that there are some very striking overlapping and continuities between the places where data labor is produced today and the places where, again, textile industries or mining operations were and still are located. Again, the example, because I spent a considerable amount of time back in Madagascar, the places where the place where data work is produced in Antananarivo is concentrated on a long road called the hydrocarbure. I don't know how to translate it. La route des hydrocarbures. And basically you see, you have very informal operations, but then you cross the street and you find like one of the biggest companies that provide call centers in the world. They are really, back to back or facing each other. And if you move like a few dozens kilometers from there, you will find, for instance, a mining operation, the biggest in the country, that produces nickel and cobalt, that are two minerals that are necessary to produce batteries. And so, again, there is an overlapping of a number of different sectors. And this is not by chance. This happens because, especially in these countries that want to attract foreign investment, governments tend to put in place what they call white zones. See what you want in the metaphor. These are zones where, labor laws are, let's say, more flexible. And by flexible, meaning that people are paid, like, again, in sugar and chocolate. And where other environmental laws are, again, even more flexible. And this is supposed to invite the same kind of foreign investment and also foreign forms of dependency and exploitation, let's be frank.
Thank you. And it's interesting that two touches on. Now I realize I have more than two. Maybe I'll try to sneak in a third question. But something else I wanted to ask you about, which I happen to think about in my own work, and that folks like Anat Singh, who's written about global supply chains, bring up, or someone like Jason Smith, who's written on mining in Congo. One thing I was curious about were these intermediaries or other kinds of actors and institutions that serve as brokers along the supply chain, and how you think about them. And it's something, sorry to interrupt myself, something I think about with Nick Couldry and Ulysses Mayhouse's work in terms of histories of colonialism. Colonialism has always been facilitated historically by certain kinds of local intermediaries. And so I was curious how you think about that, either conceptually or perhaps even more to the point politically, in terms of thinking about political structures, for instance, of struggles, of these workers that you just showed us.
Well, it's complicated because these supply chains, when compared to others in the past, tend to be longer and tend to be more fragmented. A colleague of mine...
Even more than textiles? Or
even more than, or
like
probably
that,
to the extent of textile, but I wouldn't say... I mean, Amir Anwar, who is a professor in Edinburgh, came up with the notion of chain lengthening. Basically what happens is that you probably have, I don't know, one or two intermediaries at the beginning of the supply chain. For instance, if you are a US company and you want to implement or develop a new AI solutions, what do? You probably don't have in-house the competencies that are necessary. So you turn to Google or Amazon or Microsoft and you ask them, well, work your magic, do AI for me. And you don't ask how they do it. You don't want to know how the sausage is made. And, you know, they put a lot of human beings in the sausage, but more importantly, when it comes to actually recruiting these persons, they have to go places where these persons are available, and they rely, of course, on local intermediaries. Who are these local intermediaries? In some cases, these local intermediaries are platforms. Platforms just as Amazon, Mechanical Turk, or UHRC for Microsoft, and so on and so on. But local, smaller, and with a certain penetration in a local market. But then, when you are in the local market, the situation becomes even longer because, like in the textile, again, you might have, you know, one person who has signed up to a platform, but this person decides to involve, I don't know, a cousin or their children in the operation. This is what happens.
About family,
Yes,
and
exactly.
in Hyderabad with his children, even though you said it.
In Hyderabad specifically, they were not involved, but
the twin brothers.
There is a colleague. Yeah, there is a colleague of mine, Julian Posada, who is coming up with a new book based on his research on Venezuela, and this is something we observe in Venezuela. In Venezuela, this kind of work is a family operation. What happens is basically you have one family that creates one account on a platform. They work from home, from very old computer that date back to the Chavez era, and you have, I don't know, when the children are at home, it's the mother or the father who performs data work. And then when the children come back, the children take turns, producing data. And then probably in the evening, it's the grandparents. So it becomes a matter of smaller communities, of being embedded in this kind of formal and informal collectives.
Yeah. All right, my sneaky third last question is, how did you get access to these communities, or how did the former journalist in me wants to hear how you got to sleep in their dorm and
it is
shoot them at their
complicated. It
meeting?
is complicated. In some cases, we have direct access to the workers because we spend a lot of times with them, and so it's from the bottom, from the actual field work. This is not always possible because especially when workers have signed an NDA, it becomes dangerous for them, and it becomes, of course, extremely controversial ethically for us to put them in a situation of danger. So in these cases, we have to have a top-down approach, and sometimes, have some kind of access granted by some of the intermediaries or the very companies. And from that point of view, I am teaching in a university which is called Institut Polytechnique de Paris. It's a technological university, surrounded by a lot of people who are engineers. They don't know that they are signing a contract with the devil. I am the devil. I am a sociologist. I am not very sympathetic. I look and I talk like an old-time Marxist. They don't know it when they sign it. And when it's too late, it's too late. Usually we have already published the results. And so, but anyway, so in this case, the only persons who are put in danger, it's ourselves. And again, this is something that should not be underestimated, that we are in a situation of extreme, sometimes even legal precariousness, not because we are doing something illegal, but because we are confronting very powerful and lawyered up interests. These persons have very, let's say, aggressive lawyers that sometimes knock at our door, and so we have to do something about it.
I can imagine. All right. I should stop abusing my my interviewer's prerogative and turn to the floor. I believe Bay is back there with a microphone. Is there someone?
We actually have a few questions from our Sky Lounge, if I could start with one of those.
Okay. And then I see one up here as well.
Monica asks, if AI companies in the Northern Hemisphere start off with dollars, how does this currency eventually turn into beans and rice? Is it through these third-party companies who allocate finances for both clients, AI companies, human workforce, or is it US-based companies' gross oversight?
Sure. Very good question. Yes, it is a matter of intermediaries. Each time we have an intermediary, we do have somebody who takes a hefty fee on the entire process, and on the envelope, on the budget. So usually, let me give you this example. These are contracts that we have been accessing these are basically OpenAI subcontractors. OpenAI grants these workers on paper $12, the equivalent of $12 per hour, but they only receive $1.35 per hour. How come? Well, because in the meantime, between the worker and OpenAI, a number of people, are scraping and taking 10%, 20%, 50%. Another important point is that the currency element of it is very important. It's not only a matter of rice and beans, it's also a matter of sometimes of cryptocurrencies. And this situation becomes extremely controversial, especially in places like Venezuela. Venezuela went through hell, is still going through hell for many, many reasons. Around 2021, because of COVID too, the situation was so bad that basically 80% of the population was living under the poverty threshold, and the average salary would be the equivalent of $6 per month, $6 per month. So imagine this situation. Now, it has improved slightly, but in a situation like this, you also have to add a crisis in terms of currency. The bolivar, the local currency, would depreciate from one day to the other. So there was an interest by the workers to receive any kind of compensation, either in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, or the US dollar. Now, this is a problem because, again, if you have US dollars, you still have to convert them to bolivares eventually. So you have somebody who is exchanging the money who takes another fee. And when it comes to cryptocurrencies, as you know, there's a lot of ups and downs, and these ebbs and flows sometimes determine a situation where people earn a lot less than what they signed for, at least. So there's a number of problems that are taken into account, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think the person in the purple jacket was the next.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very interesting and disturbing presentation. I had the same impression that most of what you have presented looks like the current step of a very long story on colonialism. What seems to be completely new is another part of the story that was advanced on the handout on how the user and interaction with social media and so on is also an input for all this training. So famous reCAPTCHA, just watching for half a second as a story on Instagram. Open question would be, what could you say about that? More specific question, how does how important is that volume of data in comparison to the actually hired data? Is there any comparison? Or?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very, very good question. To the extent that I devoted an entire chapter of the book that makes, I don't know, like 50 pages, just to that, what is sometimes called the social data work. Some people, some colleagues have described it as free online labor. I do not describe it as free. It is probably unpaid or uncompensated, but importantly, there is a continuum between people like you and I probably who do recaptchas for free and people who go on platforms. Usually these are like platforms like 2Captcha or Quality Bubble. I don't know if you ever heard, but these are CAPTCHA platforms where people are paid a few cents to do CAPTCHAs. Again, we do it for free, they do it for money. So it's not always free labor. And it's not always uncompensated. There is a continuity. And because of this continuity, there is also some, let's say, blurry lines and confusion. And we do not know. We don't even have the tools as of now, 2025, sorry, 2025. We don't have the tools to assess the number of people who are doing this. On the contrary, somebody, again, like the colleagues at the World Bank or the OII have tried to estimate the number of people who are paid to do this globally. So the problem is we don't know. What we can say is that insofar as we have the entire world population that now is online and everybody is more or less interacting with some kind of AI solution, because even the autocomplete on our keyboard in our smartphone is somehow based on some kind of machine learning model. We are all contributing to the training, retraining, reinforcement learning. So if I were to do like, I don't know, a scale estimate, I would say that if we have 100 people doing paid data work, we can probably say that the scale of the people doing unpaid data work would be probably 1,000. Just to give you an idea, but this is, of course, just me making an educated guess, but a guess nonetheless.
I think we have time for one more question.
Sure. Do you want to take it from the Sky Lounge or?
Does anyone in meat space, does that make
meat
me
space.
old, have a question? That maybe was what do they call it? Telling on yourself, I think is what they call it.
Thank you so much for this research and for presenting this here. I'm just curious about, there's like this, I'm extrapolating a little bit from the manufacturing space, where there's an argument for like the global south to create these hubs for like low skill, low value manufacturing hubs, which may rely on similar like foreign policy incentives that are skewed towards the Northern Hemisphere. Sure. The argument there tends to be that this is how they're going to create skills that can be utilized to create more value for them in the future. I'm just curious, like how much heat you would put in an argument like that within this space. Yeah.
Thank you so much for pronouncing the word skills, because this is a battleground. Skills are a battleground as of now. There is this common narrative or common discourse that these people that I have been introducing to you today, or probably reminding you, these are low-skilled workers. They are not. In this very same sequence from the Kenya workers, the next second, they would start discussing the fact that these are usually young and very well-educated persons. These are the top and the brightest workers in their own country. These should be the top of the labor market. Nonetheless, because of unemployment and because of what happens over 500 years of global dependencies, these persons do not have access to a job that corresponds to their competencies. When I say competencies, we systematically interview people who have master degrees, some have even PhD degrees, and nonetheless, they are paid in I don't know, sugar and beans. And this is an aberration of the labor market. If you believe in a thing that economists call the human capital, we are destroying human capital at an unprecedented level. And this is something that, you know, establishes a difference between, I don't know, the food outsourcing or the textile outsourcing of the past. Because in that case, the populations that were overrepresented in that pool of workers were actually people that had no education, that had, in many, many cases, a very modest background. This is not the case today. These are people that should be well paid, and if, for instance, they had access to international mobility, they would come to the US to work on an H-1B visa. What, this is the name? Okay, and something like this. They would earn $500,000 per year, but they earn $400 or $100 per month. And this is something that, again, is something that completely subverts this kind of discourse of these are low-skilled workers.
So I think we'll take one more question from the Sky Lounge, in fact, before we
And
wrap
we go
up.
home.
There are several good ones. So I'm going to choose.
Collect questions, and Antonio
Yeah,
can
we can-
answer
we
what
can
he
choose
likes.
Clara, who thanks you very much for the presentation. She was wondering how you think the issue of hidden labor will evolve against the current approach of governments who are engaging more and more in AI hype.
Yep.
She's thinking about notable examples like the AI summit in France and the UK's new policies aimed at turbocharging AI.
Very good question. Already this would take, okay, first of all, thank you for mentioning the AI Summit. I had been fending off invitation to the AI Summit for 1.5 years, and I can say successfully that I did not participate in that crime against humanity that was disguised as AI Summit, for many, many reasons. One of the reasons is, of course, that that summit was basically a marketing operation that eventually went sour for many, many reasons. But the important part is that these operations, this kind of policymaking / showcasing situations are the typical situations where work becomes invisibilized. And it's not always hidden. Let's be frank. If you go to Kenya, you see people going to work for this data work companies or platforms. It's invisible to us from here, and it's not always also. It's not a matter of being invisible. It's a matter of being concealed. Some companies are doing everything they can to conceal this work, because the first thing is that you should not look at the workers, you should not look at the data either, you should only look at the parameters and look at the fantastic AI performance that happens like it was magic. The second thing is that basically we do have different approaches to AI. I'm afraid to say that in the US, especially the new administration, they are really insisting on the technical side, on the data center side, on the infrastructure side. One of the first things, one of the very horrifying things that the new administration did since day one was to make sure that Sam Altman and other producers of AI would be reassured if there is a problem in terms of, I don't know, powering your data centers. We would probably remove electricity from households and cities to make sure that ChatGPT can produce, I don't know, a new Shakespeare sonnet in the form of a recipe, whatever the heck you do with it. So this is the US approach. In other countries, the approach is not at all focused on the grid or the energy. For instance, in China, the government, I'm not a fan, but since 2023, they have been putting in place very ambitious policies that encourage the creation of data annotation national bases that are subsidized by the government. Again, it comes with a lot of problems, but it's a matter of having different approaches. On the one side, companies and states and governments that want to really look at the engineering side of AI. In other cases, governments that are at least making a step towards admitting the very existence of these workers.
Thank you.
And we should go home.
Well, thank you so much again for your presentation, and thank you to you all for coming. And I really encourage you to check out the book as well as the film when it comes to the US.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Myra and Antonio. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today in person and in our Sky Lounge. Please note we have flyers on the side of the room that give you a QR code for discount on the book, and that will get sent out to our online people as well. And for those of you that are here, please enjoy the food and coffee we still have outside. BKC thanks you. Have a good night.
Thank you.